Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Garlic Week. Sadly, we are at our very last day of Garlic Week. It's Friday. We have two speakers to wrap up the week. I'm very excited to have Irwin Goldman with us today. He's going to talk to us about medicinal properties of garlic. I'll introduce him in just a moment, but I do want to remind you that you are watching on YouTube. There's a chat section where you can type in any questions that you have for Irwin while you're watching the presentation that he has pre-recorded or afterward, and I will field those to him. If you missed any of our other parts of Garlic Week, you can go to the YouTube site that you're on right now and go to the Eat Winter Vegetables playlist and watch any of those. They've been recorded with the Q&A as well. Just want to remind you that we do have our garlic zine that was written by Avram Drucker and Alex Stone at Oregon State University. Avram was the speaker on Tuesday. It's called Garlic Types and Market Niches. This is available online on the eatwintervegetables.com website. It's free there. If you want a little cute printed version of it with great illustrations, they're $5 on the Culinary Breeding Network Etsy site. Great information there. And I think that's all the details I need to give you about that. So I'm going to let Irwin say hello to us.
Thanks so much for having me, Lane. I'm really looking forward to this, and it's wonderful that you are focusing an entire week on garlic. I absolutely love that, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's been so fun, and I really hope in the future we can have multiple presentations and an entire week long. This has been really cool to learn so much about garlic. We had Phil Simon talking about breeding and the history of garlic. We had Avram Drucker, who was talking about more about breeding, different types. We got a lot of growing questions from farmers. That was really fantastic. We heard from the Colville Reservation and their Inchyllum red garlic that's culturally significant to them. And then Barbara Hellinger, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, sorry. Hellinger, who is with the National Germplasm Repository in Pullman. They were all really fascinating talks. We're really excited to also delve into medicinal properties today, and then also have folklore and magic and mysticism afterward. So today is someone who I just really admire and adore is Irwin, and he's coming to us live right now from University of Wisconsin in Madison, where he's been teaching and doing research since the early 90s, 1992. His program focuses on breeding. What I think about when I think about Irwin, first off, is beets. You know, Badger Flame, Badger Torch, Badger Sunset. These are all, thanks to Irwin, really wonderful performing and delicious beets that he has created, that he has bred, that's come out of his program. He also works with carrots and onions and has a background with garlic as well. He teaches courses on plant breeding, on vegetable crops, on human and plant well-being, food and seed sovereignty. He's a real leader in the seed sovereignty movement, and we really appreciate that very much, Irwin. Your leadership has been very important to that movement.
Thank you, Lane.
Yes, and talks about evolutionary biology. And one thing that we share in common that we both like a lot, that we talked about before here, that's not in the bio that I printed out, is our love of old paintings of vegetables. And there's one right behind me, a Cotan, and he does weave this into his teaching and talks about how edible species have changed over time, and how we, before photographs, this is how it was documented and how we can see how they have changed in old paintings. So really fascinating work there that he's brought to us. You train graduate students in plant breeding and plant genetics, which is so important for our future. And you also advise undergraduates in horticulture and plant biology, and you release not inbred lines, populations that farmers can work with themselves, which is so fantastic. And then other cultivars that are released from his breeding program that are used by gardeners, farmers, all over the world, really. So very important work that you do, Irwin. We've seen your work at the Variety Showcase as well, from you, as well as your graduate students, and just so thankful to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Lane. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. It's very kind of you, and I'm so happy to be present.
Great. Thank you. Again, guys, type in your questions. We're going to turn off our video while Abba, our tech guru, turns on the video.
Hi, I'm Irwin Goldman from the University of Wisconsin Department of Horticulture, and I'm here today to talk about garlic and particularly the health benefits of this incredible vegetable. The title of my presentation is Garlic is Better Than 10 Mothers, which is an old saying that I believe is attributed to people from China who have revered this vegetable in part because of its incredible health benefits. Well, garlic goes back thousands of years as an important, not only food, but also medicine. And it's well depicted in ancient Egypt. Some 5,000 years ago, there are very good depictions of the consumption of garlic, again, in part because it was an herb that people used medicinally. They obviously also used it culinarily for flavor. Garlic appears in many ancient texts, including the Bible, where it's in the book of Numbers. In chapter 11, they say, we remember the fish we ate in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Clearly, this plant and this food was of great importance to people in biblical times. And it's with some controversy, although perhaps some validity, that architectural historians have suggested that the onion domes, which are part of Eastern architecture, are built at least partly as reverential symbols of onion and garlic bulbs in the way that they recapitulate that form. And while that may not be agreed to by everybody, I would say that there's a strong suggestion of the importance of this vegetable to the cultures of people all over Asia, not only Far East Asia, but Central Asia, and of course Europe, in part because of the way that this vegetable played a role in human health. This is also extremely well described in ancient herbals. This is a famous herbal or a page from a famous herbal showing, like many herbals, how one can make various medicines and potions and poultices and all sorts of treatments for disease using the garden. And it's the intersection between medicine and agriculture, horticultural medicine, if you will. And garlic figures in very, very heavily to the pages of many of these ancient herbals. The idea that we're talking about here is an idea that's been around for thousands of years. The quote that's attributed to Hippocrates, let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food, is nothing different than what we're talking about today with garlic and its health benefits. And I think that this quote also demonstrates one of the key points that I want to make here, which is that the plant garlic was used not just as a source of flavor and calories, but also as a medicine. And it's woven deeply into modern folklore as well. The last, number of centuries in Eastern Europe has garlic attributed to some of the vampire legends and their fear of garlic. That's an interesting subject in and of itself, but it shows you that this vegetable was consumed widely, so widely that it became part of all sorts of legends and stories. And of course, garlic was used in Eastern Europe and in Russia and in many parts of the world as a deliberate modern medicine. During World War I, the Russian army, even all the way up through World War II, the Russian army used garlic, so much so that it became known as Russian penicillin. There's clear health connections and health benefits that have been used even into the 20th century formally by governments. Today, garlic is still not only an incredibly important vegetable and a popular vegetable around the world, but it's also the most widely used supplement, nutritional supplement, of all the plant-based supplements in the United States by far. It's double the rate of the closest, next closest, which is ginseng. So in this brief video, we don't have a lot of time to talk about all of the data, but there are at least 6 areas that I want to touch on here in which garlic has been suggested to be a remedy. An antimicrobial effect, a lowering of blood lipids and a blood thinning or antiplatelet effect, a probiotic effect, improving gut health, making nutrients more available, bioavailable, and eliminating or inhibiting certain types of cancer cells. So I'll touch very briefly on each one of these 6 in this little presentation. I think many of you know that the most significant chemical transformation for garlic occurs once the tissue is crushed, right? So once the garlic goes in a garlic press or gets chopped by a knife, the ACSOs, which are the alkenyl cysteine sulfoxides, these are the flavor precursors and are present in large amounts in whole garlic, are transformed by the enzyme alliinase into thiosulfonates. There is an intermediate, which is listed on this slide, but ultimately it's the smell and the flavor of the thiosulfonates, which are present only in the crushed tissue. That's what delivers the magic of garlic, and it's what delivers the health benefits of garlic. This slide is rather complex, but I hope that you'll be able to take away something useful from it. In the top light gray bar, we've got the ACSOs. These would be the flavor precursors in the whole garlic tissue. Then we crush the tissue. In the green bar, you see the formation of those thiosulfonates. And one of the main thiosulfonates from garlic is called allicin, A-L-L-I-C-I-N. And this is the one that we think has a lot of the medicinal value of this plant. And then finally, depending on how you cook or process the garlic, you will make different compounds. If you process the garlic in oil, you will produce vinyl dithiones and a compound called ajoene. If you process the garlic in steam, such as a boiling pot of water, you'll produce diallyl sulfides, diallyl trisulfides, allyl methyl sulfides, etc. And finally, if it's just put directly in water after it's crushed, you'll produce yet a different set of compounds. And the importance of this is to say that when we talk about the health benefits of garlic, we must also consider culinary traditions and cultural traditions for food, because if you saute garlic at high temperature in olive oil, you'll produce different bioactivities than you will if you process the garlic in steam. And so some of the difficulty in pinning down health benefits has to do with the cultural differences in the way people cook with garlic. But perhaps its most widely known health benefit is that garlic is a strong antimicrobial. That is that there are sulfur amino acids in this allicin that allow that compound to target enzymes, particularly non-mammalian type enzymes. So it's very effective. It can be very effective in organisms like bacteria, and it inactivates their key metabolic processes, such as RNA synthesis. That's what the garlic does. Mammalian cells are less affected. They have more glutathione and they're protected from the allicin. So the allicin has a differential effect. It inhibits the microbes, not the mammalian cells. And it also can inhibit not only bacteria, but some viruses, fungi, and other parasites. And so this is why Russian penicillin has been a reality in the 20th century. Also, unlike some conventional antibiotics, the allicin is volatile. And so it has the ability to kill bacteria in a vapor or gas phase, which is really interesting for respiratory problems. So many pathogenic bacteria in the lung are quite susceptible to allicin because it can be effective in the gas phase. And in fact, people historically treated tuberculosis before they had antibiotics. They treated it by breathing in garlic vapors, which probably was quite effective. One of the big claims for garlic and garlic supplements has been reducing blood lipids. And I wish I could tell you that the data are very strong for this. Unfortunately, they aren't. One of the more recent clinical studies of individuals who have high cholesterol which was a very detailed study, showed that neither aged garlic nor raw garlic affected blood lipid concentration after significant supplementation, even after more than 4 months. And a lot of the data in clinical trials are sort of like this. And so I think that the claims for lowering blood lipids are probably not very strong. This particular study was fascinating, where they fed people raw garlic and then 2 popular garlic supplements. And these, even after feeding for 6 months, compared to people who ate only a placebo, didn't reduce LDL cholesterol. And here the consumption was equivalent to an average size garlic clove eaten every single day, 6 days a week for 6 months. And it was blended and then put into a sandwich for people. And then those eating the supplements ate 4 garlicin tablets or 6 kyolic garlic tablets, or if you were on the placebo diet, 4 to 6 placebo tablets per day, 6 days a week. And the doses that are used here are higher than most of the studies that have been done in the past, and quite a bit higher than the label recommendations for the nutritional supplement products. So this was a pretty strong study, and it did not show significant results. The authors, in a subsequent letter, described the fact that they just didn't see how people could tolerate more than this on such a regular basis. Another interesting health benefit of garlic is that it has to do with bioavailability. And allicin forms in the gut under the normal gastrointestinal conditions, which are inhibiting to that enzyme. So they have coated tablets of garlic that some people use, and those coated tablets turn out to interact with what you eat. So if you eat a lot of protein in a meal, there is a reduced availability of the garlic due to slower emptying of your gastric system. But in general, non-enteric tablets have very high availability of the allicin. Garlic powder capsules are a bit lower and are probably somewhat similar to garlic powder tablets. So the non-enteric tablets seem to be the best delivery system for the allicin for people who wanted to get their garlic that way. Another fascinating part of garlic and all of the plants in the Amaryllidaceae family is that they store their carbohydrates in part as fructose polymers or fructans. And fructans have an enormously beneficial effect on the gut. So in studies where people are fed garlic, they find that this enhances the growth of beneficial microbes in the gut, particularly the Bifidobacteria. And Bifidobacteria are really valuable microbes in the gut. They can actually eliminate some negative bacteria like Clostridium. They help promote the synthesis of B vitamins and help reduce some gastrointestinal diseases. So the sugars, the carbohydrates that are in garlic are also quite valuable for the gut. Interestingly, the amino acids that are in garlic, the sulfur-containing amino acids, also seem to improve mineral uptake. And this has been shown in animals. If you eat garlic and grain, you get more mineral out of that grain than you do if you eat the grain by itself without the garlic. Somehow, those sulfur-containing amino acids help with the bioaccessibility of elements like zinc, and they increase it rather dramatically. So there is something about the combination of garlic and grain in the diet that helps with nutrition. And then one of the biggies for garlic, I think, has been certain types of stomach and gastric cancer. There does seem to be a protective effect for some of the allium vegetables on gastric cancer. And this has been found for garlic, but it has only been found among human subjects that do not consume alcohol. This is a most recent publication with a fairly large randomized clinical trial with over 3,000 people, again, those who had alcohol consumption did not get the garlic benefit, but the garlic benefit was there for people who did not drink. One of the ones that we've studied the most is cardiovascular health parameters in our lab. And there are at least 4 areas where garlic could potentially be valuable for cardiovascular health. Lowering the blood lipids, which it doesn't seem to be really doing in a significant way. Lowering blood pressure, serving as an antioxidant, or inhibiting platelets, being essentially a blood thinning agent, an antithrombotic agent. And it's that last one that we settled on to study. And the basic idea is if you have blood flowing through a coronary artery here, as represented by this green arrow, we all get plaque forming in our coronary arteries. And it forms starting at a very young age, and it accumulates based on our genetics and our diet and exercise and all lifestyle factors. But that plaque narrows the coronary artery. And as the platelets, which are little disc-shaped cells in the blood, as they circulate through that coronary artery, when the artery narrows, the platelets can form a clump and essentially block blood flow. And so it can actually be aggregated platelets or a clump of platelets that leads directly to heart attack and stroke. And this is a major occurrence and a huge problem for cardiovascular health, particularly as the walls of the plaque become thin and chunks of plaque break off. The platelets will aggregate around it, and they will cause or they will lead to heart attack and stroke. So what a cardiologist would like to do is to reduce that effect. Aspirin is one of the most commonly prescribed drugs for this, which is, of course, also originally a natural product. But with at least 1/4 of the US public having some form of cardiovascular disease, many people take a half an aspirin a day or a baby aspirin a day, 81 milligrams or whatever per day. And it's interesting to know whether you could get that same benefit from eating an onion or eating garlic, because they do have antiplatelet factors in them that would inhibit those platelets from aggregating. And we've measured this in a whole bunch of different ways, including in vitro systems in the lab and in an animal model system that was developed by John Foltz, who's a cardiologist. And this measures the blood. This measures the blood flow through a coronary artery, and a probe can detect when platelets are aggregated and when platelets are not aggregated in that coronary artery. And it turns out that garlic is very effective at inhibiting the aggregation of platelets in animals and in humans. A very, very small dose of garlic juice will inhibit the cyclic flow reductions in the coronary artery, as indicated where that red arrow is on the slide. Administering garlic juice or onion juice will smooth out the blood flow through the coronary artery. And that is a very beneficial effect. And it inhibits intravenously, it inhibits intragastrically, and it doesn't take very much in order to get a strong effect. So the blood thinning effect is quite pronounced. And I think many of us who eat garlic are aware of this, because when you eat a lot of garlic, you feel flushed, you feel that warmth, and part of that warmth is your blood flow, which is partly motivated by the inhibition of platelet aggregation, the blood thinning effect of garlic. So to summarize, I would say that trials generally suggest the benefits of garlic on antimicrobial activity. There's some lipid lowering, although it's not strong. There's definitely a blood thinning or antiplatelet effect. And there's some potential with certain kinds of cancer cells, particularly the gastric cancer cells, but there's not an effect on blood pressure that has been well described or found in clinical trials, nor on blood glucose. So, it's not a panacea, but there's definitely some potential in certain areas. And I quote a paper that does some of this work to say that conclusions regarding clinical significance are limited by the quality and short duration of many trials, and also, importantly, by the unpredictable release and inadequate definition of active constituents in study preparation. So if you're having garlic oil or garlic tablets or garlic powder or whole raw garlic. There's so many variables. And part of the difficulty in demonstrating these effects using modern clinical trial medicine is that you have too wide of a variation of the raw materials. In addition, I would say that trying to validate the health claims using the clinical standards of Western medicine probably also misses some of the things that we care about for this plant with respect to overall human well-being. So I don't want to take away from the value of clinical trials, but I want to say that just trying to replicate effects in a clinical setting doesn't mean that garlic isn't incredibly valuable in all sorts of ways. And I'll just make a couple points here. One, humans vary greatly, and the results can easily be obscured in these trials. It's very difficult when you collect thousands of people to demonstrate an effect, partly because of the tremendous amount of human variation present. Some benefits are extremely difficult to measure from dietary intake, in part because of the way humans vary, in part because of what else is in their diet or what else they do in their own behaviors. And so it's difficult to demonstrate those effects. Also, and maybe most importantly, I think overall well-being includes social factors and cultural factors. And in consuming a food that is traditional in one's culture, that is part of traditional recipes that you share with other people, contributes an enormous amount to human well-being. And so even if one cannot demonstrate a significant p-value in a clinical trial, one can certainly demonstrate a tremendous amount of well-being that is not quantifiable in any scientific sense, but still incredibly important for human health. And I would say that quite literally, there is in the trenches proof of garlic's medicinal activity, not just by the Russian army, but by people going back many, many thousands of years of using this and getting benefit in all sorts of different ways. So we have a wonderfully value-added product that I think has been people have been trying to fit it into a modern clinical setting with some success, although not completely. Well, it's been my pleasure to share some ideas about garlic's health benefits with you, and I look forward to listening to the other garlic presentations and hopefully engaging with a number of you who've had a chance to listen to this video. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irwin. Wow. A lot of information there. I really appreciate it. It really appreciate translating what all of it meant as well, because it gets very complicated, especially for those of us that aren't used to reading medical journals.
Right. Yeah, it's such a, in some ways it's a misfit to try to take this ancient vegetable and squeeze it into modern medical science. And although there are some really good examples, and there are some great examples where it shows that it works. But in some ways, I feel that those two spheres of our life aren't always fully compatible.
Yeah, definitely. We do have a couple of questions, and then I also didn't tell you beforehand when we were talking that Avram sent me some questions. He emailed.
Oh, wonderful.
He watches these. He watched your presentation ahead of time, and he watches them, but he doesn't have the best internet, so it's hard for him to interact on here. So I'll questions. But one thing I wanted to say at the beginning was the title, which I hadn't introduced it with, was just "Garlic is Better Than 10 Mothers." You talked about a little bit, but isn't it also a documentary?
It is. It's a wonderful documentary, and I think you can find it on YouTube. And there is just some beautiful, beautiful footage in there of deep appreciation for garlic, not just a culinary appreciation, although that's very clear in there, but also it's the way it's woven into culture. And that is really, for anybody who's interested in garlic, totally worth watching.
Great. Yeah. When you said that title, I was like, that sounds familiar. And then I looked it up, and I haven't had time to watch the documentary, but I definitely will.
It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. And I like the title too, because it's sort of a proverb, right? And I think they say its origins are in Asia and probably China, But of course, it relates to this notion of healing and care and well-being, which I think it has.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So one of these questions is from Patrick Mercer, who we were just talking
Oh, wonderful.
beforehand, who was a student at University of Wisconsin. And he says, so Avram talked to us a lot about when you're growing garlic, how it mines the soil for sulfur.
Yes.
So he did talk to us a lot about how sulfur, like soil type and sulfur content really can affect quite a lot the flavor in that. And I can ask a follow-up question about that. But this question is garlic mining sulfur from the soil. And he noticed that the precursor chemicals that you were talking about are sulfur based. Can you help us connect soil health to human health in terms of garlic?
Beautiful question. So glad to get that question. And Patrick was a very memorable student at Madison, and I'm so glad to know that he's working back with you at Oregon State. That's absolutely true. So all the onions and garlic and all the plants in the family take up sulfur from the soil as sulfate, just like all plants do. So in that sense, they're like all other plants, but they're different than all other plants because they take that sulfate and they package it into these compounds called ACSOs. That's an acronym, but the full title is alkenyl cysteine sulfoxides. And it's kind of like the garlic's storage form of sulfur. It's like a special package that it puts it in. So Avram's absolutely right. The plants they take up a lot of sulfur. They will also, by the way, this is kind of an aside, but selenium is a very similar element in the periodic table, and garlic also will take up selenium if it's present, as it is in some of the Western soils, because they're very, very close. They're very similar. And it'll pack that away in either alkenyl cysteine sulfoxides or alkenyl cysteine selenoxides. And those then represent like the reservoir of flavor. And we call them flavor precursors because essentially the flavor of your garlic is going to be determined by those ACSOs. And so I would say that soil health and sulfur content, selenium content to some extent, because selenium does actually have an interesting flavor, all of that matters big time for the garlic. And so let's just say you could grow your garlic on a sand with almost no sulfur in it, it would have much less flavor and it would have much less of these beneficial compounds. So I think it's totally connected. Soil, sulfur, and other elements are absolutely integral to what the garlic quality is going to be.
Yeah, that is interesting. And, so it was also a question that Patrick posed, I think, to maybe to Barbara yesterday, or maybe it was to Avram. But, when we think about G times E, and it's like, so we have genetics and then environment, it was to Avram, I remember, and environment being everything from weather conditions to soil type to amendments and all these things and the way that it's grown. As far as garlic is concerned, do you think that one has more of an impact on flavor? It sounds like garlic possibly has more E impact than other vegetables that we consume.
I think you're right, Lane. I think that the E being the environment in this part of the equation, sulfur availability in the soil will be a major determinant of quality for sure. And if I could just give the example of the Vidalia onion. So one of the reasons why that thing is so mild and so non-pungent is because it's grown on soils that are extremely low in sulfur. So if you could take that same Vidalia onion and grow it in a high sulfur soil, it would be very pungent. It would have a very different culinary experience. So I think the same is true for garlic, but we can't deny too that genetics and of course the evolutionary history of garlic is critical, because this processing of sulfates into ACSOs is a really unique thing that this family does. And it is just a powerful, a powerful system for the preservation of flavor that no other plant does quite the same way.
Cool. So two people asked about black garlic and do you have any knowledge of the health benefits of black garlic being black garlic being the aged garlic that has been traditionally used in Asian cultures?
It's a great question. Some of the studies that I cited used black garlic as as some of their treatments, oxidized form. And I would say from one side of my brain, I think it's going to be less effective in a number of different health remedies because the compounds are volatile. Over time, these sulfur-based compounds like the thiosulfonates go into the air. And I think every one of us knows that because when you're cooking with garlic, right, you can smell it around the house and the stuff is just volatile. On the other hand, Larry Lawson and Eric Bloch and other people who are like, world-class chemists who study garlic say that the compounds, the thiosulfonates, like allicin that we know of, get transformed and they get rearranged into other compounds downstream. So I feel like the aged garlic and the black garlic could very well have enormously beneficial compounds that we haven't even yet described because the compounds are not stable and they transform into other things. And so I will not be surprised at all if we find that aged garlic, it possesses some incredible compounds. And I think that's a very fertile area for study, but I myself don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's see, we got one from Avram also that kind of talks about the age of the garlic I don't know if I can find it right here right now because it's a long list, but but he does ask about in these studies, like the age of the garlic is going to have a really big impact on the potency and the health benefits of it.
It's so true. And I think that's one of the big limitations of these clinical trials. And I can say I'm a horticulturist and I have worked with people in the medical fields and they're brilliant and they've been fantastic partners. But one of the things I've discovered is that they have no appreciation for what you just said. And I'll give you an example. The guy who developed the model that I used to test the cardiovascular health, he was doing a study on grape juice. And so he brought all these bottles of grape juice to his lab and he just had them out in the lab. Well, they oxidized and had no effect.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until someone pointed out, hey, this is a natural product, like it's subject to all sorts of things. He was like, oh, and so they redid all those studies. And sure enough, they found that if you put it in dark glass bottles, it had a completely different effect. So I think the same is true for garlic. It's going to matter. Avram's right. It's going to matter how old it is. It's going to matter how it was treated, where it was grown. And very rarely do those things get considered in these trials. And so I guess it leads me to think about two things. One, from a self-centered point of view, I'd love to have horticulturists involved in those studies because I think we can bring that perspective. But two, we have to take some of the clinical trials with a grain of salt in that if they just went to the grocery store and bought a bunch of garlic that could have been sourced from many, many different places, it's very hard to know what that really means.
I know, it's so hard to control the variables in any of these things.
Yep. Yeah, you almost need, we need to grow it on one farm and source it, so we know exactly what it is. And those kinds of trials are possible, but I would say that they're not that common.
One question that Avram had that I think is a really great one because he gets asked this a lot at market. So I think it's so important for us to be able to have the information, be able to talk to consumers about. But he's like, what is the best way to extract and preserve garlic's medicinal properties? He says, I guess that depends on what one's health issue that they're trying to address. But if one is a market customer, not a farmer that eats an absurd amount of garlic, maximize, the health benefits of garlic. And as you were showing the slides, I was thinking about how I use garlic and I was like, oh, wow, should I start using garlic this other way? Or like, am I using it in the best way? I mean, I just enjoy garlic. I'm just going to eat it in all different forms, I guess. But, and I'm eating it for more than just the health purposes. But yeah, when we're, how do we advise people? Like, you hear about the crushing all the time. And I always think, well, aren't we crushing it when we're like eating it with our teeth? So
we are. And then that allicin is forming in our gut, essentially. So, but about the question, if you bought I guess the first point I'd like to make is if you buy chopped garlic in little glass jars, and if there you can buy some in oil and some in water. If you see them in the store, they will have very different compounds in them. They will have different bioactivities. And it turns out that the thiosulfonates, which are probably one of the main suites of compounds that are responsible for garlic's health benefits, they are soluble in water and they are soluble in oil. So the jar will have thiosulfonates, but it's differential. They're more soluble. Some of them are maybe you're going to find more of them in oil. It'll be slightly different forms, just like I showed on that slide. You'll create some additional compounds in the oil that you won't create in the water and vice versa. So unfortunately, I don't think that there's a good answer to this question. I guess I could just say that different methods of preparation will produce different suites of compounds in the end. And science still does not know what method will be best for which ailment. Mm-hmm. I could tell you, so from the point of view of the cooking, I can boil garlic. If I took garlic cloves, peeled them, and put them in boiling water, within 1 minute of boiling, I lose all of the medicinal value for the blood thinning property. 1 minute is enough to completely kill it. And it does two things. It kills the enzyme, and it also drives the thiosulfonates into the air. Mm-hmm. So if I wanted to preserve that, obviously the heat, I would not use heat, and I would use a tincture. I would use alcohol or probably oil. Mm-hmm. And I think either one of those would at least preserve the thiosulfonates to some extent. And of course, a lot of people dry garlic, but if you look at very dehydrated or very dried product, it has almost no medicinal activity. Mm. So and interestingly, that ends up in a lot of the garlic nutritional supplements. Is the dried product, some of which has been dried in such a way that there's too much heat and the compounds are driven off. Right. So if I had to preserve the compounds or the activity without a lot of prep, I guess I would put whole cloves or ground cloves in either alcohol or oil and try to trap them that way. Mm-hmm. But that whole area opened up my eyes, because when I first started working on garlic, I didn't realize it was going to be that dependent on the methods that you used. So if you cooked in a wok, for example, and you seared it on the outside, maybe you are only on the outside affecting those tissues, and on the inside you still will have your allicin preserved, right? Whereas if you put it in a pot of boiling water for an hour, forget it. So anyway, it's really, these are questions that I think we still don't know the answer to.
I know, it's so interesting. I didn't even know, I always just buy garlic, or grow garlic. And this is what I use. I've only just recently started using garlic powder because farmers I work with have given it to me. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole different thing as far as flavor is concerned and how you would use it. It tastes very different. But I've never bought crushed garlic and I never even noticed that it also was in water, which I just don't think I would buy because it's not like it would taste very good. And you can use the oil if you've got it in oil. And when I do come to a point in the season where it's like, okay, my garlic isn't going to store anymore, I want to preserve it. This is what I have done, where I've just slice it with a I just, get all the cloves unpeeled, slice it all with a mandolin, put it in a jar with a bunch of olive oil, and just put it in the fridge because I don't want it. And then I just use it as I go.
That's a great way to do it. I mean, I think that's another great way that people do is they freeze it. Mm-hmm. And that works really well too. You can crush it and freeze it. Mm-hmm. And that product I think is a great way to preserve it as well.
Okay. Yeah. Someone just asked about freezing. Okay, we have a few more questions coming in, and everybody's getting warmed up.
Good.
One Avram does ask about making garlic powder, because he makes garlic powder and he slices the garlic at 2 millimeters and he dries at 105 to 110 degrees. Mm-hmm. The threshold where allicin readily breaks down is 125.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and he says I freeze and then grind and sift. The thought is that if the powder is reconstituted in water, that the organosulfur compounds would still be activated, can still be activated. Is that right?
I think so. I think he's right. Yeah, I think you will lose some with the cooking process, with the drying process, but I think his protocol is optimized for this. Any higher any higher temperature, and I think he'd lose too much.
He also told me that he puts his garlic powder on popcorn.
I'm sure it's fantastic.
Like, what am I going to do with all this garlic powder?
Yeah, I'm sure it's excellent.
Right. Okay, let's see. Someone asked, what about tinctures and vinegar? I don't have an old garlic syrup recipe, but that puts crushed garlic in apple cider vinegar for 4 days, then a day of glycerin, then strain, and then in honey.
Yeah, I think tincture is a great way. I'm not expert in this, and I don't know. I don't want to sound like I'm authoritative on it at all, but I do know that the compounds will be readily soluble in the tincture, and it'd be a great way to trap them, and probably a very, very beneficial way to take garlic.
Okay, great. And that same person is asking about supplementing with sulfur. Is it necessary in the eastern part of the United States?
It's usually not, but if you do add calcium sulfate, for example, I mean, you'd probably add it in a soil amendment like calcium sulfate. The plants will take it up. Interestingly, we found that they will take it up to a certain point at which they stop, and they just keep the sulfur in the roots. So they won't translocate it to the bulb beyond a certain point. So you could fertilize with sulfur. You will get a little extra flavor, but you won't produce something that's super hot and off the charts, because they just reach their limit.
And they didn't ask today, but a lot of the same folks are on that have been on other days, and they did ask about amending with phosphorus. What do you recommend for that? What kind of amendments do you use when you guys are doing trials, or do you amend with phosphorus?
We usually don't, but maybe that's something that I'm just not familiar enough with the Western. Is it these folks in the Western US?
I'm not quite sure actually where they are.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. I'm not really sure what we tend to not use very much here.
What is the fertilization regime that you guys use when you're doing any kind of trials or grow outs?
It really depends on the location, because we have sandy. We have a pocket of very, very sandy soils in the center of the state, and then we have very highly organic soils, which tend to have a lot of all of these nutrients in them. So on the sands, we will have a much more robust fertility program that would include a lot of these amendments, probably also the phosphorus and potassium, and maybe even the sulfates as well. And then we've got organic farms that have really good soil health that have built up over time. So Wisconsin's so diverse. There's not just one plan necessarily.
Yeah. Okay, Pennsylvania. Someone was from Pennsylvania that was asking.
Yeah.
About that. Let's see. Here's something else from Avram. I'm just going to read it because I didn't read it yet.
Okay.
In the studies that you looked at, was there any accounting for allicin content of the variety of garlic being used? And was there any accounting about the garlic being used at all? 10 years or so ago, there was a study on St. John's wort that debunked a lot of the claims made about it. It turns out that the material used had been in storage warehouse for a few years.
Yeah.
For a study on garlic to have validity, the potency of the product seems like it needs to be necessary. So we kind of addressed that a little bit.
It's totally true. Yeah, he's right. And, I tried to quote studies where I thought that they had taken some care with the plant material. So a couple of the studies I cited had people on their research teams who were sensitive to this issue. And so when, like the one study I cited where they ate 1 clove of raw garlic every day, 6 days a week for 6 months, that study was done very, very carefully, where they sourced the garlic. They didn't standardize it according to allicin concentration, which would have been a fantastic thing to do. But they did take great care to feed people the same thing and to be very careful about where they sourced it. But in general, the scientific literature is full of studies where people just went to the grocery store to buy garlic, and they might have gone to 3 different stores to buy garlic, and they might have used garlic from different continents and different years and stuff that had been in storage here and there. And I think that again, is just one of the, it creates noise in the data that makes it really difficult to know if we're not finding an effect because there's really no effect, or if we're not finding an effect because the materials we're using just can't ever, they're too variable. And because horticulture, I guess one of the points I was trying to make in the video is that horticulture and medicine right next to each other. They were like literally in the same garden, and now they're far apart from each other, at least the way science is done. And because of that, we've lost something. So I think that's why I want to try to take the clinical trial data, not with a grain of salt, but just carefully, because I don't want to say that that's the be all and end all.
Yeah, I mean, in all of this that you're reading, like what's happening right now? You say you're working on cardiovascular health disease in your lab. Are there other studies that you've got going on right now, or what studies would you want to do with garlic as far as health, human health and garlic?
So one of the things that has been really interesting to me is the raw versus cooked, because I think in the onion work, we did a lot of work on onion, and it does appear that the raw juice was the only thing that worked for humans and animals. Like you could see a huge effect of the raw juice, and you'd see zero effect with the cooked. And in some cases, cooked actually had a negative effect. And we could talk about that sometime. It's very interesting. So my question is, how much, does a person have to eat raw garlic in order to get benefit? And if not, what kind of preparation could we use? And maybe a tincture is right because it's not cooked. That was the study that I really wanted to do. Another one that I'm really interested in is, we know that garlic thiosulfonates can move through the skin. They can move through the placenta for pregnant women. If a pregnant woman eats garlic, the fetus will get thiosulfonates. Also in breast milk, we know the way it moves through membranes. I would love to know whether we can get some of these benefits through the traditional poultice type thing, because clearly that's a delivery system for the thiosulfonates. And then finally, the third one that I want to try has to do with something like aromatherapy, because when you breathe in garlic, you really get those thiosulfonates in your system. And that does appear to be a treatment that people have used for various respiratory ailments. And I think it probably is a very interesting delivery system, and one that might not upset somebody's stomach by inhaling raw garlic. And so these are all things that I would love to try.
Yeah, that's great. Let me see. Abba's got a question. Is there anyone working on different cultural preparations and how that relates to those culture-specific ailments?
That is such a great question. I think no, but I don't think anybody's like devoting themselves to that. But I feel like there's a whole world there in your question, where we start to look at different cultural preparations and then try to link them to particular bioactivities. I don't think anybody's done that work yet, but I think it's a future. And I really feel like, talk about interdisciplinary studies. Don't you feel like you could have anthropology, food science, horticulture, medicine, right? Wouldn't that be like the most interesting?
Yeah.
I would love to work on something like that.
Yeah. Let's make it.
Go ahead, Lane, sorry.
I was gonna say, let's make it happen.
Yeah, it could very well happen. And I feel like there are probably some fantastic secrets out there in parts of the world of the ways of preparation and the ways of eating that we just don't know about, that probably make, I mean, some of our techniques with the vegetables are frying them in hot oil is probably not going to be like a great remedy. So anyway, I love your question, Abba, and I would love to work on something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this has been great. I think you got to this one with this and what we've just been talking about, but what questions around garlic flavor, cooking, breeding would you prioritize?
Yeah, I'm really interested in, as you know, Lane, from working on beets, one of the things that I wanted to work on was creating a beet that people could eat raw, that was easy to eat, that was sweet, that was, just you could eat as a crunchy root vegetable. I would love to make a garlic that, what if you could, it's not that I want to remove garlic flavor, but what if you could tweak garlic flavor to a point where this could be easily eaten raw? That could offer some really interesting benefits for people that have gastric distress from eating raw garlic or who can't tolerate the flavor. So I'd love to do that with breeding. I'd love to do some of these other studies with aromatherapy and with skin work. So I'm totally fascinated by this. And I hope I get a chance to do some of this work. I do think that there's increasingly opportunities to get funding to do this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. It just, you got to figure out the right team and the right approach. And I hope I get a chance. So.
Well, I do too. It would be so fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate so much of your work that you do. So important, so interesting. And you have a really fantastic way of presenting it to all of us that keeps us really engaged in all of it. So
well, thank you, Lane. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you all. And I really appreciate everybody's good questions and participation. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you. This will be on YouTube recorded for later. So I'll send you the link so you can send off to people if anybody wants to watch it. We've got Mary in the waiting room. We're going to get off the videos here in a minute and you'll see a picture, a beautiful painting of garlic.
Okay.
And then hope everybody sticks around and joins us for Mary, who's going to talk about folklore and magic and mysticism with garlic through the ages.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Take care.
Hi, everyone. We're back with Mary DeLorenzo-Woods today. Mary, you can pop in and say hi if you like. This is our... Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Great. So excited to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited. I just watched Irwin's presentation. It was great and so informative and really inspiring. So I'm so excited to present next.
Cool. Yes, we are too. I mean, we've had such a really fantastic garlic week. It was just even better than I had imagined. It's been so much information from, medicinal, the medical studies, to plant breeding, to how we have collections that were from all over the world that people that want to research can access, a lot of farming questions. It's really cool. And we're so excited to have you here today to really round it out, because I feel like one really fantastic way we can get people more involved and interested in vegetables in general and eating differently and healthy and eating whole foods is to really delve into the cultures that are behind them and the folklore and mysticism and magic that you bring in. And these stories that you tell us they have so much meaning. They interest you so much and make you want to know, ask why, why Why did people have these beliefs? And we just had Irwin, I was talking about you with Irwin before we got online, and he was like, yeah, now we have like this, and we've talked about it, this medical science that kind of backs up these beliefs and these intuitions that people had, and as well as their experiences before we had, medical science to kind of validate them. So it's really cool to have you here to talk about that today.
Absolutely. I think, like you said, getting people more interested in vegetables and herbs, and when we start to connect the plants and the vegetables to our own backgrounds and all of our unique cultures, they start to become more personal to us as beings, and there is more interest and there's more deep connection, and it becomes something so much deeper than like, oh, just eat vegetables or take herbs because they're good for you. We start to really feel into the truths behind the stories and connect through our unique lineages and cosmologies. And I definitely agree with that sentiment.
I know you live it all the time. Fantastic. So just to let everybody know, I found out about Mary because I'm taking a class to connect back to ancestors, and my ancestry, as most people are watching know, is a Sicilian American, and most of the folks that are in this class are of Southern Italian or Sicilian descent. And we had a presentation, a special presentation from Mary, who is 100% Italian. And she did a presentation on rosemary for like an hour, all about, rosemary. And I just absolutely was blown away. I was at the edge of my seat the entire time. Was so excited to hear all these stories about rosemary. And I just remember thinking, gosh, I've really taken rosemary for granted. It's just this thing that's always been around me. And I had never really, but everything that you shared with me really like rung true and like felt true. And I was like, wow, these are all the feelings I have about rosemary that live within me because they have been very culturally significant to me, but I just never even paid attention to because it was like air, it was just there. And something as ubiquitous as garlic, and maybe many people, I see that you have some garlic behind you. I like that. Garlic is ever present in our world in so many cultures. And it's just something we throw into like an onion. It's like kind of like the backbone. It's like it adds layer and depth. And we think about it in a culinary way, and farmers think about it and growing it and all of these things. But it's like to like kind of dive deeper into like the deep history and people's relationships in different cultures with this plant. I'm really excited to have you share with us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
I do want to read your bio. You gave me a bio that I think is fantastic, and I'd like to read it so that people know a little bit more about you. Mary DeLorenzo-Woods is a folk herbalist who's interested in creating meaningful relationships with plants and bridging the worlds of science and spirituality and magic by taking a deeper look at folk tales and plant stories. Mary has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Women and Gender Studies from SFSU and studied plant spirit medicine and folk herbalism at the Gaia, is that right? Gaia School of Healing and Earth Education. Mary offers one-on-one plant sessions with clients, leads workshops, makes art, and is committed to ancestral healing work. She's the mother of 2 daughters and is heavily guided by her Italian American background, which is just shines through all the time.
That sums it up.
So really excited to have you here today. Thank you for pre-recording a presentation. We're gonna have Abba show that. And just a reminder, everybody who's watching on YouTube, chat us up in the box with any of your questions, and we'll meet back here in about 20 minutes to talk to Mary live. Thank you.
Awesome.
Hello everyone, my name is Mary DeLorenzo-Woods. I am a folk herbalist, among other things, and I'm thrilled to be here today during this amazing vegetable sagra presenting during Garlic Week. Today I will be talking about the magic, mysticism, and folklore surrounding this ancestor plant that is garlic, a plant that has been written about and used for thousands of years across many cultures and many different lands. A plant that has a lot of interesting tales surrounding it. And really, what I would love to take away today is this idea that folklore, despite seeming mysterious and magical and old-timey, really has a lot to teach us. And as modern medical studies start to emerge more and more in the present day, we find connections between folklore and modern scientific studies. And this idea that people were in direct relationship with plants long before there were medical studies, and were really learning from plants. And a lot of these tales were sort of born out of people's direct experience with the plants. And we can draw connections between science, what we know now about garlic and its medicinal properties, and a lot of the, seemingly mysterious tales and magic around the plant. So without further ado, a plant that's been used for thousands of years, garlic, and had a huge presence in the ancient Greco-Roman era. The ancient Greeks would place bulbs of garlic at crossroads in the evenings, and that was seen as an offering to the goddess Hecate. There is so much to be said about Hecate, but she's a goddess associated with herbs, poisonous plants, death, magic, witchcraft, necromancy, and the bulbs of garlic were seen as this divine offering to give to her. On the contrary, in Roman times, in Roman culture, garlic was associated with the god Mars. So a little bit more of a masculine energy. Garlic had this fire and intensity and heat that to the Romans they really felt was associated with the god Mars. They actually gave the garlic to their soldiers, their Roman soldiers, as they believed that it really inspired endurance. It protected them in a protective shield, and it really gave those Roman soldiers the heat that they needed to persevere and to be strong soldiers. Same sort of vein, it was given to the Greek athletes to give them endurance and strength. And the Romans really believed, and it's believed to this day in Italy, that garlic was protection. It was placed around the home to protect, and even besides the actual plant of garlic, images of garlic, drawings were placed around the home, seen as protection if they were placed on the walls. And a lot of pictures of garlic were discovered at the Pompeii excavations, So really fascinating stuff. In Egypt, it was believed that garlic was an offering to the gods. It was taken in tombs with folks into the afterlife. They actually discovered garlic in King Tut's tomb. And the enslaved peoples that were forced to build the pyramids were actually given garlic daily. It was believed that if they were given their garlic daily, they would have the energy and endurance to continue and to be able to build the pyramids. So much so that the enslaved peoples went on strike at one point, asking that their rations be upped, that they could have more garlic so they could keep going. So they really felt like they needed the garlic as well. It was helping people to feel that they had the strength they needed to get through. Now, something with garlic and folklore that I think a lot of folks are familiar with is this idea that it repels vampires. It repels bad spirits and dark witches. And this is actually a folktale that we see across many cultures. The Romanians used garlic to repel vampires, placing it around the home, putting it into keyholes and onto windows. In a lot of protection magic rituals throughout different cultures, we see this idea that things like keyholes or openings in the home are places where bad spirits can get in. And so we want to cover up those holes with keys or with other things that sort of block the energy. So Romanians, as well as other cultures, would put the garlic in the keyholes or on the windows. And another garlic connection in Romanian culture is St. Andrew's Day. Is a day where it is believed that dark spirits or unsettled ghosts, you can call them, come to earth and sort of wreak havoc. And it's this one night as we draw closer to winter and as the nights are getting longer, it's this idea that maybe these unsettled ghosts could disrupt agriculture, disrupt daily life. And garlic is seen as a major protection plant, along with a few other plants that can be placed around the home or used to protect against any unsettled energy. In China and Malaysia, garlic was known or was rubbed on children's heads and on babies' heads for protection against, again, vampires. And something really interesting to note with this fear of vampires and dark spirits is that what are vampires but bloodsuckers and creatures that rob humans of vitality and rob humans of sort of pranic energy and are parasitic creatures. Later, it was said that the eating of garlic, and to this day, might repel mosquitoes, also parasitic creatures that we see in our actual daily lives that aren't such folkloric characters like vampires. But we draw these connections between wanting to repel parasitic, blood-sucking creatures that rob us. You can also draw the connection between a vampire and an illness being something that robs us of our life force and vitality, and garlic being something that can repel or ward off a sickness. So again, this idea that folklore actually reflects what we come to know about the science or the medical qualities of a plant and what it can do for us and how it can be an ally. So this idea of repelling vampires or dark witches is actually very true when you think about the incredible science behind garlic and its ability to protect us from sickness and act as sort of a penicillin type plant. So throughout Central Europe, especially through the Middle Ages, garlic was really seen as this plant to ward off demons, to ward off, once again, vampires. The Zoroastrians, some of the oldest practitioners of religion in the world, really believed, or I should say believe, in garlic as a protector, as a cleanser of one's environment, but at the same time, a plant that is to be respected and a plant that is humbling, because while it can protect and get rid of sickness and clean our environment, it's thought if not burned correctly, burned to purify the air, the skins, it can really aggravate dark energy. It can aggravate sort of unsettled energy. So it really speaks to garlic's intensity and power. And it's a plant that can help and make us feel safe and protect on many levels and many energies, but also is a very intense plant to be revered and respected, a plant we should be humbled by, because while it can protect, it also can aggravate. And we actually know that physically, that while garlic is so good for us, too much of the plant can be aggravating and upset the stomach. So it's this respect, and once again, we see reflected in a folktale really what we know to be true about the plant and its technicalities, its science, its medical studies. So moving forward, while garlic across many cultures has been known to repel witches, to keep them at bay, the flip side in that is we see in Balkan folklore and in other folklores cross-culturally this idea that we can detect witches, so let's say maybe green witches or healing witches, by what types of garlic they choose. So it was thought that if you notice, you could find a witch by noticing where she or he or they might grab their garlic and how they might plant their garlic. So old, mysterious, arcane sort of ways, such as planting garlic in a snake's head. That was part of Balkan folklore. It could really help you detect a witch. Also, how garlic is planted and harvested in accordance to the sacred calendar, which we still see today. I will get into a bit in modern Southern Italian sort of sacred practices. But garlic in Balkan folklore, having been harvested on Easter Sunday, St. Peter's Day, or the Feast of the Annunciation. So if garlic is harvested on those days, it is said you can spot the witches in your community or in your village by when they're harvesting their garlic or planting their garlic. Another beautiful myth is a Korean myth that says that a bear was fed 20 cloves of garlic and mugwort every day for, I believe, 100 days. And after 100 days of Korean mugwort and garlic, that bear transformed into a woman who created the first kingdom in Korea, which I found to be a beautiful tale. While garlic is seen as this plant that should be ingested for protection or should be used for protection, there are some cultures, spiritualities, and religions that advise against using garlic, that find it to be aggravating. In Ayurveda, it is believed that too much garlic and onions is aggravating and actually can interfere with one's meditation practice, can cause too much energy flow to the point where it's creating too much heat and aggravation. And it's also said in Buddhism that this plant could get in the way of meditating, that it can be aggravating and heating. So just some interesting notes to see all sides of the plant, again, as we try to scratch the surface here in 20 minutes. But one of the most fascinating or interesting nuggets about garlic, it's not necessarily folklore, but it kind of shows garlic's relationship to the social strata and to people's place in society. Is in Renaissance era. I'll speak to Italy, although I believe this can kind of be across Europe and other lands as well. But garlic was really seen as a peasant food. It was a people's food, as most fruits and vegetables were seen. They came from the earth and the dirt, like the peasants that worked the earth and in the dirt, and they were seen as peasant food. Whereas more noble foods were aged cheeses and game and fowl and meat. So nobles who knew that garlic was good for you and knew the power of it, they didn't want to ingest it because they thought they were too good for it. They thought it was a peasant food and they did not want to be like the garlic eaters. So in order to get garlic in the diet, if they wanted to get garlic in their diet, they would cook the garlic with heavy meats and heavy cheeses and expensive food items because it made them feel that they were masking the garlic. They weren't interested in using herbs or plants of their local area or that were commonly available. They wanted to use spices and herbs from other lands that were seen as exotic or expensive, such as, if we're talking about Renaissance Italy, ginger, cinnamon, saffron. So the garlic was cooked in these expensive spices and other foods in order to mask it so they could still get the garlic in and feel that they weren't stooping to the peasant level. There are cookbooks from the Middle Ages and from Renaissance times that show us these recipes. It's fascinating that how they would sort of disguise the garlic. And while, you know, it shows us how the nobles were prejudiced, and that's, you know, a very bad thing against the peasants. It also tells us that this is a people's food. This is the everyday people's food. It's power to the people. It reminds us that herbal medicine is the people's birthright. It is and always will be the people's medicine. And garlic to me is sort of this symbol of resistance, of people's medicine, of people being empowered with their own healing modalities. And that's just something I love about garlic, about this beautiful plant. So moving in a bit more into Italy and the magical connections between garlic, folklore, and Italy. I am of Italian descent. This is where I feel the most comfortable talking and where my research and practice and herbalism lies. But for Benedicatia practitioners, Benedicatia being a form of healing, a folk healing that combines Catholicism, folk Catholicism with herbs, saints invoked for healing, and other modalities. Garlic is seen as a plant connected to Archangel Michael, who I have behind me here. Archangel Michael being the fierce protector, the one who helps us overcome obstacles, who helps us cast out darkness. Garlic is seen not as a symbol of Saint Michael, but really as the essence of Saint Michael, that garlic really is Michael. And just like some folks believe the body and blood of Christ is in the bread and wine, folks will believe that garlic really embodies the essence of Michael. Saint Michael is very much revered revered in Sicily and in the Sicilian countryside, there is a legend or a belief, really, that garlic was placed at the cross at Mount Calvary when Jesus was weakened on the cross and in his most vulnerable state. It was believed that garlic was placed at the foot of the cross to protect Christ when he was vulnerable, so that dark energy and dark spirits couldn't infiltrate his weakened state. And so it was believed that garlic was really the force that protected him. There is a prayer, the miraculous garlic, which is said. I know garlic is used in other cultures. I can't speak to that as much, but garlic is seen as a protector across other cultures and is also associated with Saint Michael in other cultures practicing some form of folk Catholicism. But really, again, just magnifying this idea that garlic is a master protector plant and really there to cover us in a shield of protection, keep us safe. Beyond that, on the topic of Italy, there is a modern, well, it's not modern, it's very old, but still to this day, there are practicing witches there, old wise women, in this village called Peraldo near Turin in northern Italy. This village where it is said that witches gather to this day, that they heal, that they pass on their healing gifts to their granddaughters as they get older. But on the feast day of St. Martin of Tours, which is a very special day in this village and to these people and these wise women, visitors come into these wise women's homes. And what they do on the feast of St. Martin of Tours is they all gather around the cauldron, or if you will, pot. And this famous dish is made called bagna coda. And bagna coda is this medicinal healing broth that these wise women make. And everybody bears witness to this creation in this cauldron. And the main ingredient in bagna coda is garlic. It's olive oil, anchovy, and garlic, and it makes this beautiful dipping sauce. And garlic is truly seen as a healing plant in this dish that protects and that heals and helps with digestion, as well as along with the magical properties, also with its healing very medicinal properties to keep the body safe and to keep sicknesses at bay. So we see this garlic has had and held magic and mysticism and protection for thousands of years, and to this day, into 2020, is still seen as an amazing protective ally. And I'd really like to end with garlic as an ally in 2020, as a COVID ally, in more ways than one. In the Middle Ages, during the bubonic plague, it was noticed that garlic sellers were not dying from the plague as quickly or as much as other common folk. And as people started to catch on and notice that the garlic sellers were thriving more than others, folks were dipping their masks, just like we wear our masks in 2020. They were dipping their masks in a garlic-soaked vinegar and feeling that it was protective and that they would have a better chance of surviving the plague. In 1858, Louis Pasteur discovered that garlic contained an antibiotic oil that may have boosted the immune system during this time. After that, it was really believed that garlic was a protective plant against cholera, typhoid, and other sicknesses. As modern as World War I and World War II, garlic was used as an antiseptic for soldiers in the war and for preventing infection. And so we see this long history for centuries leading into today of garlic being used to protect us. We see this idea that garlic repels witches and vampires and evil forces, and then fast forward hundreds, thousands actually of years, and we have modern medical studies to back up this idea that garlic does keep sickness at bay. It does act as an antiseptic. It does really keep us well, and it's a common people's medicine that really is an ally to all of us. So I invite you to take all of this this magic, this medicine, this power behind garlic and to use it in your life. There are so many incredible ways to use garlic. You can obviously cook with it, and I love to crush it up and put it in olive oil and dip my bread in it, in my daily delicious bread. You can make fire cider, the famous thieves vinegar, which has garlic and onions and horseradish root. There's so many incredible recipes these days for fire cider, but garlic is most definitely a key ingredient in that delicious, powerful, healing fire cider tonic. And the simplest thing you can do that my ancestors and Bisnoni did, and many of yours, is to wear a little garlic necklace. Put a clove around your neck for protection. You can put it under your shirt, but wearing that garlic close to your heart, close to your skin, really feeling the powerful essence of garlic. And yeah, garlic is a beloved plant. I don't think it's going anywhere, and I really hope that after today we can all really carry this idea that we have so much to learn from folklore, from old tales and stories that grandmothers and grandfathers have told for so many years, because there is often a lot of medicine in those stories. There is a lot of truth in those stories to be uncovered, and so much to learn. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so thrilled I got to have a few minutes with you to talk about this ancestor plant and all of the magic surrounding this incredible plant. I can't wait to go back and check out all the rest of the presentations, and please reach out if you want to talk about garlic or talk about any more plant tales. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye.
Mary, that was fantastic.
Thank you.
So informative. I mean, I watched it once before and now I watch it again and I'm still like, I don't even know what questions I have. I mean, I have some things to say, but it's like, it is just so thorough. And I mean, I love what you just said at the end about how our grandmothers, I think about, I grew up very close with my next door to my Sicilian grandmother. And it was like, and we talk about this a lot in the class with Mary Beth, where I met you, is like all of these things that they would have us do, like throw the salt in the corner and like, this is what's ailing you right now. And this is what you have to do. You drink, like grapefruit juice and honey, and then you put the garlic in it, and then you do this and that, and aloe. If I have to have a spirit plant, I feel like it's aloe, which we can talk about later, which was constantly used in our home for everything, which I didn't even know was a thing until I went to Sicily and I saw them eating it. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, I guess that's why we were doing it. But it helps to make a lot more sense, because like, it's like this, you growing up in this place where you don't know any better because that's all you've ever experienced. And these people are doing all these things around you. And I guess I just thought they were doing it because they were a little odd, but there was reason behind all of it,
Yeah. And I think, we think we're learning new things, or we're learning the magic behind it. Like you're saying, oh, I grew up with these things, but now I'm learning all this magic. And what we always need to remember is like, we're not learning it, we're just remembering it. Mm-hmm. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not new. It's just something that we're kind of awakening within us, this old medicine that we all carry. We all carry different ancestral stories. We all carry different cultural medicine. And so it's this idea that we're really just remembering. And I'm the same as you. I grew up with all these herbs and kind of folk things in the background, and I just thought they were normal. And so now when I'm kind of uncovering more and more meaning, and I'm interested in looking deeper, and then realizing that even if I didn't know really the deeper meanings, I was still receiving that medicine when I was younger. And we're still receiving all of that because the plant or the practice embodies all of that. And we're getting that medicine, even if we were little or younger and we thought it was weird or we didn't know. We were still receiving all of that folk medicine, because the plants are beings, they hold the history, they hold the stories. And so I just love that idea that we're all just remembering rather than learning. I mean, of course we are learning on a like kind of a conscious level, but it's all back there. It's just kind of coming forward and it's awakening within us.
Yeah, and I think even those that didn't grow up, like if we grew up close with our nonna and we saw this and we lived it in our life, even those that didn't have any kind of like access to this growing up, I think like hearing these stories awakens it in us from, long ago, the mitochondria that, continues forward in our body that was in, our mother and mother's mother's mother, and so it comes through in that.
Absolutely.
The one thing, so, and I mean, we talked about this before and it's no problem. Also, if I ask questions and you don't know, I don't feel
Oh, okay.
to a lot of people are like, I don't know. Because I know your focus really is Italian, and like there's a lot of information in Eastern Europe. There's a lot of information in Italy about this. We know that this plant is originally from Central Asia, and we saw like excursions to Kazakhstan and other places in where wild garlic still grows. Have you run across? I mean, you mentioned Korea and the beliefs around the bear eating the garlic. But have you run across very much information that is not like focused in Europe around garlic in as far as folklore and mysticism in your studies?
I mean, there is definitely a lot around Egypt. So in Africa, that's outside of the Greco-Roman and European sort of lands. But of course, we know there was a lot of action going on between Egypt and Rome, and sort of that makes sense, like how those, that the garlic traveled and the stories traveled. Yeah, I did mention the Korean story, as you said, and sort of in China and Malaysia, the belief systems around the vampire, like we see those same like overlapping tales. But I can't say I have a lot of research in like a lot of my research and sort of what I've come across is Greco-Roman and Egyptian. And again, like sort of similar stories overlapping through those lands. I'm sure there is, really interesting stuff to uncover in Asia. It's just, my focus has just been a little bit more on like the Mediterranean regions. But I do find it totally fascinating that across all these different lands from Asia to Africa and Egypt and Europe, that we see this overlapping sort of story about vampires. And that is something so prevalent in pop culture. Like most people, especially like American pop culture, have heard that, oh yeah, vampire, Dracula, garlic. I went to this Halloween thing last year where they had this Dracula display and they had like hanging garlic, just tons of hanging garlands of garlic. And I loved it. I saw I'm like, I want that in my house, all that garlic. But I thought it was so interesting that like, even in this campy Halloween, display, like that is just a folk tale that has really persevered like more than most other folk tales. Almost everyone has kind of heard that with modern pop culture. So there's definitely like some of these stories have really traveled distant lands and throughout thousands of years, and really just like they're not going anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, it's so interesting. When I was thinking in my head about how many I have 5 garlic braids and a garlic wreath, and I'm like obsessed with them. I have like a visceral reaction to them. I want, more and more of them. One thing that was really interesting that Irwin said before we got on for his presentation was he's like, he's like, it's so hard to make the correlation with the vampire thing, because he's like, you would think that vampires would want us to eat more garlic because it thins the blood, and then they'd really be able to like suck down more blood. So he's like, I think about it a lot as to like, where did this come from?
That's so interesting. I love his like perspective, more of that super science-y perspective. I mean, I think of it as a plant that has such a strong energy. And like, even when you look at its association with the god Mars to the Romans, and that it's like a shield. And that's why, I mean, if you look at it more of that way, that's why it would repel. It's like this shield. It's such an intense plant. And like for myself working with it, I was working with it making brevi bags a few months back. I was putting together these sort of Italian folk medicine pouches with garlic. And after working with it throughout the day, I kind of had this really intense energetic reaction to it. Not like a physical reaction, but I suddenly felt like, whoa, I feel such this intensity around this plant that it felt like something like I needed to take a step back And I've always known, have humility with this plant. Like I mentioned before, we know that it can cause like digestive upset, or it's just not the kind of plant you want to take too much of or have too much of. But I really had this overwhelming, humbling moment with it, where I really felt like, wow, this is an intense plant to be respected. Like, I bow to you. I need a little break from this sort of energy is very intense for me right now. So it's just, I feel like the more we work with plants and really reframe our relationship with them and dig deeper, more layers kind of unfold. And like for me, I've been eating garlic my entire life. It's been in my grandmother's, my grandfather's homes, the smell of it my entire life. And I can eat tons of it without any adverse reactions. But it was interesting as I was going deeper, how suddenly it almost felt like it was a lot for me. And I'm like, okay, for the first time in my life, I kind of wanted to take a step back and take a little break. So in that way, I really feel its connection to like being this really intense protective shield that,
Yeah,
can repel.
I know, it's interesting too, how you said, and we think about how like the pressure for Italians that moved to the United States and the pressure to assimilate into this culture. And what you mentioned was, the smell of garlic. And this happens with so many cultures, like so many, like Indian food, Korean food, any kind of like other culture food gets like, a bad rap, and people want to think of it as lesser than like the elevated American food. I don't know, but, and garlic being something that's hard to hide, the odor of that. To me, it's always been like extremely comforting and I love it. But it's like, it wasn't enough to make us stop eating it here. There's too strong of a connection, I feel like. So even though there was like this social stigma and there's one shame around it, making us feel lesser than white, or lesser than, being peasants and all these things, ideas, we still did not stop eating it, because there's just too strong a connection, I feel like, to the plant.
Yeah. And what's really interesting about that in regards to Italians is my research has led me to discover that we as Italian Americans, and that's a whole separate issue, but Italian American culture being, different than Italian culture, we actually use a lot more garlic than they do in Italy. And yeah, you probably know that as a farmer and such, but I thought that was really interesting. I thought, oh, how funny that we came here, and like you said, you want to assimilate and sort of mask certain things and try to fit in, but it's like we kind of went the other route with garlic and used even more. Yes. There's definitely some of the folk practices that were rejected, and that's something really important and something that can't be overlooked with folklore and folk culture, is that people have been demonized for it. And it's not, I've been having this conversation with some friends lately, really going into looking deeper at folk culture and how we can romanticize it. And it's so magical and fun, and we want to reclaim it, but there is a lot of intense sort of, social strata stuff around it. But anyways, my point being, the Italians, didn't stop cooking with it. If anything, cooked more with it. But the folk practices of wearing the clove around the neck, which is a very, very common folk practice against like, Italian immigrants 100 years ago or so, that kind of died out. Stuff like that, that was seen as like, you didn't want to be wearing that anymore. That was weird. It was seen as uncivilized. And so those kind of things that some of the granddaughters of the immigrants are reclaiming, we're reclaiming that, and we're, reaching for it. But that's definitely sort of a way in which it was pushed away, the folk culture and wanting to assimilate.
That's funny that you said that about us using more garlic. I was going to say the same thing. I didn't know that until I went to Sicily and I started noticing. I was like, wow. And they oftentimes, if they cook with garlic and oil, and then they take the garlic out. Like, they don't actually eat the garlic. They use it to flavor things and pull it out. And then especially if it started sprouting, oh my gosh, it's like, you just don't even touch it. But a lot of still like superstitions around that. And then I was on a cooking class just recently with someone who was Italian American and myself. And then we were on a cooking class with some Sicilians. And the guy, the Italian American, was like, "What are you doing? What about the garlic?" And the Sicilians looked very confused, like, "What do you mean?" Like, no, this doesn't have garlic. And he's like, "But it has to have garlic." But we have gone the opposite way and just rated more.
I mean, I grew up like when I would go both of my grandparents, I'm very fortunate. I grew up really raised by all four of my grandparents. So I'm so blessed every day for that. But I think about walking into my Nana's house and the smell of garlic and onions and olive oil, like literally sticky in the air, just smacking me in the face when I'd walk in, when we'd go over for a dinner or something. And the same thing with my grandmother, but really just getting smacked in the face, feeling almost the oil in the air and that smell of garlic, and just that intensity that really, I don't know, it's very much connected to Italian culture in general, just the intensity, the passion. We're here, we're loud, like smell that garlic.
Yep, exactly.
So it's very comforting to me.
Someone's asking a question and asks if the garlic behind you is for protection, and if so, where else do you put it around the house?
That is actually my culinary garlic that I put over there just to kind of bring in the spirit as we had this conversation, and it's in front of the image of Archangel Michael. But you can put a bulb of garlic on an altar space, and everybody hears the word altar, they have a different sort of perception and connection to that word, but let's just say a little space in your kitchen, little sacred space. You can put garlic on there, and in the Benedicatia practice, in the sort of Southern Italian folk practices of protection and such, it's believed that a bulb of garlic on the altar brings in the spirit of Saint Michael, of San Michele, Archangel Michael, and really, as I mentioned, invites his spirit in. Like, it's not just a symbol, but it is seen as a way to invoke and bring in the spirit of Archangel Michael. That being said, I also, as I mentioned, make little bags, little sort of folk medicine bags. I brought an example, and this is full of my garlic that I've dried out. I actually made into a paste and dried out as not to mold, but these can be placed in the car. Everyone in my family I've made these for, including my parents and my husband and my kids. My daughter, when she was going to school before 2020, had one in her backpack. I like to, you can put them in your car, just anywhere you feel like you want to have that extra protection. There's not really any rules around it. Just my belief is that if I have garlic in my kitchen, like for cooking, it's there, it's protection, just having it in the house. It doesn't need to be in like a special place. It's here. It's loud.
After the rosemary presentation, I've started carrying rosemary with me. So how many different herbs and spices and, and vegetables are you carrying around with you at all times? So I'm like, I
have to be honest, garlic is the like protection herb for me, where, I've been carrying my little bag around in my pocket when I need to go to the post office or to the store during the pandemic. Rosemary is a bit different. Like, of course, any plant you connect with can be your power plant, can be like your ally and your plant that you are carrying around for protection and that intent that you have that goes with it. I tend to connect with rosemary more for like specific purpose. Like if I'm doing something and I want to be clear-headed, or, even like today, giving a presentation and really wanting to like express my truth clearly, I might call in rosemary for that. But if I want a protection ally, foolproof, I call in garlic always. Garlic is my ally for that. And I'm not original in saying that. As we've been talking about, it's for thousands of years been that plant that is the protection plant.
Okay, I'm going to add it to the purse.
I know, if you hang out with me long enough, you'll have 10 plants in your bag.
No. Okay, so you're down in Los Angeles area?
Yes.
Do you grow garlic in your yard? Do you have a yard to grow in? I see some, maybe a bird of paradise behind you.
I do have a bird of paradise. I do not grow garlic here. I don't have space to grow in the ground. And I would love to talk to you or any other garlic growing experts on if it's possible to do in a pot. I haven't had great success with that. I've tried. My Sicilian grandmother, she's my only living grandparent. She grows garlic in a pot and does it beautifully, but she can grow anything. And hers are just flourishing. I've tried and I have not had success. So if anybody has any tips on that, I'm open.
Okay, I'll follow up with you about that and send you some garlic too.
Awesome. I do have rosemary growing. I have rue. I have other Italian protection plants, but garlic, I have not gotten that one down yet.
Okay. Same person asks, the protection factor, is it associated with garlic in general, or the smellier the better?
I think it's garlic in general. And the reason being, again, this is like a people's medicine, and folk medicine in general. It's about accessibility. It's the idea that anybody can use these practices. Anyone can practice herbal medicine, and it's about what you have and using what you have. And it's not about having fancy breeds of garlic or apothecary cabinet full of different things. And we kind of talked about this in the rosemary workshop, is we need to really start identifying herbalism more with accessibility, because it's become a very glamorized thing. And there's all these different, exotic, I don't like that word, but just quotes around it sort of thing, or exotic herbs are more revered. And we really need to look at this idea that it's about accessibility, what you have in your cabinet. Do you have a little bulb of garlic you just found in the back of your fridge? Use that. You have a little, bit of ginger or honey or apple cider vinegar, use those things. It's not meant to be this thing where you have to go seek out all these special things. And the second you start reading things, or people are telling you need to buy all these very specific, special, expensive herbs, or you need these certain tools, like that's where, to me, kind of a red flag goes up, where that's not really folk medicine or folk magic. It's really about accessibility and this idea that anybody, like it was the people's medicine, like we talked about the peasant medicine, the garlic. It's really whatever you have is what works, and it's about your intent and your prayer behind it.
Yeah. What about if people were interested in reading more about this? Like I'm interested in where obviously you've been going to school and learning about this way, but if people, and I have recently started buying some books to try to learn more about, folklore and mysticism and magic associated with a lot of different plants. I'm always trying to fit it into the cultivated vegetable world. Like this is perfect, where it's like, there's this overlap where we can bring this into something where we would typically be talking about like production and how much fertilizer and all these kinds of things, but I don't know if there's anything about cauliflower out there, but, for vegetables or for herbs, are there books that you recommend that people should read if they want to learn more about this?
Well, specific to garlic, I did put together sort of some research resources and links of like where I, have gathered some of my information and just some of what I talked about. So that's just a little part one to that. Is I'm happy to, I don't know if you have a recommendation of where to share that, but I did put together some links.
Okay.
Just if people wanted to go further.
I put it, if you send it to me, I'll put, when we post this video on YouTube, I'll put it at the bottom, and I'll put more information about what services and things that you offer. So if you want to talk about that too, that'd be great, because
oh yeah, absolutely.
Want to go
as far as books, there are plenty. I'll have to kind of rack through my brain, and I'd be happy to put together a little resource list, but I was really lucky when I studied herbalism with Gaia School. I have to say the way Gaia School taught connecting with herbs and meditating with plants, it was really about direct relationship with the plants and learning from them. And I think that's what really even deepened my interest in all of this and kind of opened me up, was this idea that if we sit with an herb, with a tea, a plant, and you drink that plant in, and you really just sit with it and listen and get into that mode of listening and opening, the plant really starts to tell you different things, and you start to feel these stories open up, and you almost start to literally feel the parts of the body activate that plant is known to help. And then of course, once you meditate with the plant and you start building relationship, you're also studying and researching and reading the science and the herbal actions and all of that of the plants. But this idea of learning directly from the plant, I'm so grateful that my herbal schooling was in with that method, because we can read all day in books about plants. We can learn extremely valuable information and do lots of research. But until we really sit with the plant, the herb, even if it's a toxic plant that we would never eat, just sitting with it to kind of learn about it and experience its energy, that's how we really, really open up to these stories and receive that other side of the medicine, rather than just research and all, technical stuff. Yeah. So I'm really grateful for that experience. I think I would recommend to anybody that's interested in this, I can surely pull together some books, but I recommend just sitting with plants. And if your whole life you've loved chamomile, and you've been drinking chamomile and you know it helps with your belly or it helps to calm you, maybe try like opening up in a new way and sitting with that cup of tea and just getting quiet with it and like feeling the essence running through you. And again, it's about reframing. Like a lot of us have been eating garlic our entire life, but maybe if we open up to like really looking at the plant as a being, like an animal or a human as a spirit, we can receive different aspects, different layers of the medicine of that being of the plant. So that's my biggest recommendation for opening up more to this world.
That was what one thing that was very special about your presentation in Mary Beth's class was that, you know, I wasn't prepared for the class. I didn't know we're supposed to have rosemary tea, but I have plenty of rosemary. But so it was like going out in the yard, getting the rosemary and then sitting and really like sitting with it and concentrating on it. And you led us through that. And it was like, wow, like this is, again, it was like, I've just taken this for granted. It's always been around. And now like really concentrating on just thinking about how my body was reacting and where my mind was going when I was like sitting with rosemary.
Yeah. And garlic and rosemary have, you know, what they have so much in common is like, we talk about abundance and it's common and it's everywhere. At least, you know, in certain parts of the world or where we live. And, going, like you said, you took it for granted. So did I. I've taken rosemary for granted before I came into a deep relationship with it. And really realizing that the more common the plant, it doesn't make it less magical or less interesting or medicinal. It's kind of the opposite. It's like this plant is everywhere for a reason. And we see that with the wild weeds as well, the stinging nettle, the burdock root, all the wild weeds that I adore working with as a folk herbalist. The more common they are, their medicine is everywhere because we need that medicine. We need that medicine. Everybody can benefit from being around the spirit of those plants. And also, again, this concept of not always having to eat it. We don't always want to think about what we can get from a plant. Like that's really kind of a limited way to look at it. And I think when people are first approaching the plant world and herbalism, it's fun. You know, this idea like, what is this plant going to do for me? How can I ingest it? How can I take it in? And then kind of coming to the realization over time, like, let's not always look at a plant as what it's going to give us, you know, and how it's going to help us medicinally or spiritually, but can we just open relationship with it like a friend or a loved one where we just want to sit with it. We want to exchange energy with it and be in conversation with it and not have to be consuming it. Mm-hmm. But we're also giving our energy and it's this relationship. And at a certain point when you kind of start to get in that mode, and I have, you know, I'm not an expert at all. I have a lifetime to learn from these plants and beyond. And I'm so open and humbled by them. But the less you need to consume the plant. Like for me, I find a lot of times these days, I'm not even really consuming herbs or teas as much as I used to. It's almost just like I'm like being in relationship and in presence of the plants and just connecting with them without having to eat them.
Yeah. That's great. It's such a unique viewpoint, at least from someone who's, you know, works with plants in a very different way that I, you know, in my world in agriculture, and to like just kind of reframe our relationship with these plants. Somebody is asking how you got involved, like what your journey to Italian folk medicine, like how did you get there? How did you get interested in that?
Oh, well, it's kind of hard to sort of name a starting point. Like I don't really see my journey that much as like a linear path where I can really name this sort of starting point that started it all. It's really cyclical and there's been so many layers. Like I said, all my 8 great grandparents are from Italy, mostly Southern Italy. So, and I was raised by my 4 grandparents along with my parents. So I obviously had a heavy like Italian American influence. So of course that's been shaping me my entire life. And sort of the folkloric aspect is, it's hard to say. I mean, I guess ever since I was little, I've loved magical things. I'm one of those people where Halloween has always been my favorite holiday since I was 2 or 3. Anyone who knows me knows I love Halloween. And I think kind of mythical characters and creatures my whole childhood. And then as I got older and kind of started connecting with nature in a new way and getting into herbs and plants and learning to live with the seasons more and all of that, it sort of I started seeing the truths and all this kind of mystical stuff I always loved as a kid, and being able to pull those truths out, like we talk about with folklore and its connection to science. And to me, there's just nothing more exciting and magical in the world than like finding those truths within those stories, and you know, finding the realness of magic that way. So I guess that's how, you know, kind of the short version that I could come up with on how I arrived here. But I guess also the older I got, I just, you know, I think it's normal that we want to reach into our culture and our ancestry more the older we get. When like we're younger, it's weird or it's whatever. And then we kind of start feeling into that wisdom as we get older. And suddenly everything our grandmothers had to say is very exciting. And we want to get that medicine, and we want to remember, and we want to research. And so I kind of just see my journey as a remembering and just getting excited about what I'm passionate about and talking about it with others. And I'm not an expert in anything, honestly, but I just know what ignites my heart, and I love talking about it with others. And where my path will continue, I don't know, but I'm having fun.
Well, you're great at it. You really appreciate the way that you present this to us and get us thinking about things that we might not be, and like remembering, you know, especially for those of us that had close relationships with grandparents that were closer to this as far as like living it day to day. I feel like that they're gone. We want to stay, you know, that's what the ancestry work is too, you know, is like staying connected and grounded to them and our past, you know, and being able to find still those, you know, that connection with those people that came before us, that we are part of them, you know, it's been a really great journey. And I know it seems like a lot of people are more interested in this work nowadays, you know. So I hope that I do encourage everyone to look you up online. You do a lot of really amazing things, and you could help a lot of people kind of start their work down, you know, and start their own journey into reconnecting with plants and their culture and their ancestry.
Yeah, I love, thank you for opening that up. I love working with folks. I work with people one-on-one, and I do what I call plant sessions. And I have an intro and then a little bit more in-depth program, but it's the same idea we're talking about, where I have folks work with one plant, because again, I believe in simplicity, in cultivating relationships, and over the course of a month, and just really trying to get folks to open up to what we're talking about, this idea of plant connection, of sort of making space in the body and really just sitting with a plant and letting it come into you and getting to know it on different levels, and just deepening relationships, and really viewing plants as beings like animals or humans, these beings that we can get to know and that exist on the planet that we are part of, in this organism that is Earth. And yeah, so I love doing these sessions with people, and people do really amazing work. I love to witness that and just kind of be in the background and watch people do their own healing work, and with the help of these plant allies, which have been in relationship with us and our ancestors for so many years.
That's great. So there's one last thing, and there's no pressure here, but someone is asking you too about, about like giving guidance on doing like a ritual, and if with garlic, and if you wanted to maybe show us like what an example would be with that, like just something short with garlic to kind of send us on our way for our day, you know.
A ritual like that some people can do later on their own or in this moment.
Yes, you can do that. Yeah. So if you have like guidance on that for people that do, put intention into the world for protection, and that's something that they could do later.
There's two things. I mean, a very simple thing we already talked about that I believe just carrying that plant close to your skin and your heart and having awareness is just doing the simple little garlic necklace. I love that. My family members and I have been doing this practice through the pandemic quite frequently. And it's again, I'm really into simplicity. It's a simple little act you can do to carry with you and to just be reminded of that plant spirit throughout your day. Another thing I just highly recommend is putting a bulb of garlic just for a ritual, like on a little kitchen altar. And an altar can really be whatever you want it to be. But just invoking that spirit of garlic, and kind of when you have an altar, like I have an ancestor altar, Lane, I imagine you might, you're in the ancestor program. We all have different sort of sacred spaces, but when you have an altar, it's something you kind of pass by throughout your day, something you're aware of. And that's the point of it, is when you pass by it or you walk up to it and it's in kind of a place, accessible place in your home, it sort of serves as this reminder, and it's a place you can drop in. Like when I pass by my ancestor altar, I might fix it up a little bit when it gets messy, and I can just drop in for a minute. Like right before I joined in on this call, dropping in with my ancestor altar, just asking them to give me grounding and guidance to speak the best I could this morning with you all. But I recommend, if you want to connect with garlic, putting a bulb of garlic. I would put a candle, like even a little tea light with that, and you can light that candle. And garlic being a very fiery plant, a very protective, heating plant, a plant associated with Archangel Michael, bringing that fire element of action. Fire is invoking. It carries our prayers out into the world because it is energy in itself. So that's why candles are associated with prayer. They really bring our prayers into action. So I would say making a little altar with a bulb of garlic, a little candle, and really it can be that simple. And just having it, if you really want to invite garlic in, having it be something you see throughout your day or walk by in your kitchen. And you can either leave the garlic there, or maybe you stare at this for a week and kind of invoke the spirit of garlic. And then maybe you cook with some of those cloves, and you know that you've been infusing those cloves with your, you've been exchanging consciousness with the garlic plant. And you know, as you cook with that garlic or you eat with it, however you eat with it, that you're bringing that protection energy into your food and into you. And so that's a really beautiful way to sort of connect with a plant, is sort of put it on an altar, really be aware of it, and then cook with it later and bring that energy all into you and into your body temple. So again, very simple stuff, but I would recommend either of those things for invoking the spirit of garlic and bringing it into your sphere.
That's great. That's great advice. Thank you. And your ancestors pulled through, because this was fantastic.
Thank you. Oh, it was so wonderful being here with you, Lane. I'm really excited you and I have connected, and I hope we can do this again and talk more about plants and share. And I know I have so much to learn from you. I'm excited to learn from you on sort of growing, maybe, or all the medicine you have to offer.
Yeah, I will get in touch with you about that. And thank you so much for sharing. And I hope that we can, when it makes sense for you, to incorporate you into these, into our sagra, to talk about different vegetables and herbs and the folklore and medicine around it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I also want to say, if anyone wants to reach out to me or, tell me a story or ask a question, I'm completely open to that. And this is what I love to talk about. So I'm here for that.
Great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful
Thank you,
everyone, for tuning in. This will be on YouTube later on today. And so people that missed it can tune in then.
Sounds great, Lane. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.